What's going on, guys? Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. Today, we're looking at the technical checkpoints that are keys to Novak Djokovic's forehand technique. If you want to find out what makes his forehand technique so good, stay tuned. It's coming up next. Okay, so let's jump into Djokovic's forehand technique right here. We've got Djokovic here on the left from 2023 Australian Open, and then on the right from 2023 in Cincinnati, playing a practice set against Hubert Hurkacz, right? So we've got that footage right there. And then over here, right, we've got the back view right here. Here we've got the side view. So we're going to look at two different views and break this down and give you the key technical checkpoints on his forehand side. So just first things first, some things we can see from the side that we can't see from the back, right? Just a little bit different view here. We can see the left hand here is on the throat of the racket in a pretty high up position. Djokovic tends to hold pretty high up on the throat of the racket versus somebody like Rafa, who will tend to hold a little bit lower down here in this section when he's holding the racket. So he ends up holding here. And if it comes to his backhand side, he'll quickly slide that down, make his grip change, and slide that down and go to a backhand. But here, we've got the forehand. A couple other things, right? We can see the body position here. Even though this is just a hitting session on the left, he's got a nice bend with his legs right here. And then over here in the actual practice set, we've got a really wide base with the feet, which is going to be key to getting ready to hit this forehand on this side. So a couple good things with the back and body there. Another thing we can point out real quick here is the elbow separation just right here, guys. On this particular shot, right, the elbow separation between his elbow and his body, he's got a little bit of a gap. You want to have 1 to 2 tennis balls gap between your elbow and your body, usually when you're getting ready for a forehand. Federer, Nadal, a little bit of the exceptions on this, but I do like a tiny bit of a gap on the forehand, so Djokovic uses that. And then just kind of going forward from there, guys, we see here, right, nice wide split step, especially on the right side. Look at that wide split from Novak, feet past shoulder width apart. And then just going forward from that position, we see a bunch of really good things here, just technique-wise with Novak. So again, we talked a little bit about that elbow gap here. We can see it very clearly on the left side of the screen. Again, 1 to 2 tennis balls away from the body is more than enough. If we do more than 1 to 2 tennis balls away from the body in this position right here, the racket, once we elevate the elbow up like this, the racket will point too much forward, a la kind of like a Nick Kyrgios, not picking on Nick, but it'll point too much forward. So just a little bit of separation is okay or good. And then from this position here, we see some other really good things, right? So again, look at the elbow position. We've got basically a 90-degree bend with the arm at this stage, a tiny bit of forward racket tilt here, which is fine, and that's okay. We just don't want it to be excessive. And then we see really good posture here on the left as well. His head is lined up essentially just right over the middle of his hip, so he has really good balance in this position. And then just coming forward from here, we see a couple things, right? He starts to let go of the throat of the racket right here as he gets to about his back shoulder, so that's a pretty good checkpoint. We really get a nice windup on the forehand when we let go closer to the back shoulder. Alcaraz takes it even, seems like, a little bit further past that point. And then the same thing we notice here on this side of the screen, a very similar position. And then if we just look at his shoulder turn, right? We can see he doesn't really turn the shoulders much here past 90 degrees. So he doesn't have an excessive shoulder turn. He has a nice shoulder turn. And in this position, we'll see his belly button is pointed to the side just like this. And his chest, right, also pointed off to the side like this. So we have that position on both sides. But we don't turn excessively, which would kind of break that ATP forehand if we turned too much. So just from there, we start to let go. Djokovic kind of has the old school. We now see a lot of people bring the racket back a lot lower on the forehand side, but Novak still will maintain his hitting hand at or around shoulder height on his forehand, right? So he still uses that style on both sides of the screen. We see his hitting hand is at or around shoulder height. So he keeps that position. I think it's comfortable for him. And he doesn't have any issues on his forehand where he really needs to shorten up his swing. So this works really well for him. And then just from there, guys, we see the non-hitting arm, right, starts to kind of sweep off of the racket just like this. His chin is currently kind of over and looking over the front shoulder right here, right? And then again on this one, look at the left arm, the position of it, a little bit bent, and it'll start to straighten out just a little bit more there, a tiny bit as the incoming ball comes in. And this is kind of a myth on the forehand side. I want everybody to know this as well. You do not have to have your hitting arm completely straight at this stage of the swing. And in fact, I think if you go back and look at somebody like a Thomas Berdych, who did get the hitting arm really straight really early in the forehand swing, it makes things a little bit too mechanical. As long as your spacing here is good. You don't have to have the non-hitting arm completely straight, nor should you, as long as you do a good job with your spacing. And we'll see with Novak's hand, if we look at the ball, it's coming in here on the right side. The ball basically lines up with where his hand extends to with that line. Another really key component to this, and something that's important on the forehand, is when Novak lets go of the racket, right? The tip of his racket, in his case, is not too far away from also where that incoming ball is going to be coming into for the actual contact. And there are other players that line this up even more, like a Yannick Sinner. But again, left arm here doesn't have to be completely straight. And then that racket, right, kind of lines up the tip of it here, the side of it, with the incoming ball as well. And then just moving forward from that position, guys, we'll get a few other details here. Look at all the racket strings here, right? Kind of pointed a little bit back towards the fence. Now, he does have a really strong semi-Western grip, and that can dictate the angle of the strings and how they're pointed back. But in his position, a 4-4 grip, essentially, this is the position that he gets into. Nice upper body coil. And again, really look at the knee bend here, especially on this side, using a semi-open stance in both of these forehands, right? On the left and right side of the screen, we got the back foot behind the front foot. So not a true open stance, but a semi-open stance. And then from here, his hitting hand just starts to drop below. And when it drops below, right, we all know this at this point, but to have the tip of the racket head on the right side of the hitting hand if you're a righty, as you drop this to help create that racket leg and that setup position for that racket leg. And then as we go to pull forward from here, we see this flip position from here to here, and the tip of the racket, the big key that we're looking for is, does the tip of the racket get behind the hitting elbow? And in Djokovic's case, it definitely does, and that's one reason that forehand is so big, right? He's getting it behind the hitting elbow. And then even here, we get a little peek. It's tough to see there at the grip, but he is a 4-4 grip, so a true semi-Western grip position. And then also something we noticed too, a lot of players don't really use their legs to hit the ball, but we go from this bent position right here, right, with the legs, and then we end up going from that position and at contact. And I know this is a high ball here, but look at how straight that leg does become at contact, right? And then if we look at the one on the left over here too, it's a lower ball contact height, like a knee to hip, but this leg again is straight, and that leg originally was considerably more bent when we got into our loaded position here. And even on the lower ball, what do we see? That leg straightens out into contact and becomes much more straight at contact with the ball. Another key checkpoint here at contact, guys, something that we're looking for, right? A little bit of space between the hitting elbow and the body. We don't want to be jammed. A lot of times right now I'm working with juniors, and with juniors, you do see them get a little too close to the ball. They don't space themselves out, and their elbow will be connected to their body here quite a bit instead of spaced out. So that's something that I'm looking for. And also with that elbow position, we look here on the left, the elbow, the hitting elbow should be in front of the hips. On an aggressive attacking ball, we're looking for contact out in front of the body. I always tell everybody this: everything that's good in tennis that can happen to you for the vast majority of the time is going to happen in front of you, out in front of your body, and not anything that gets into you or jams you. It seems like a common sense thing, but a lot of people really do have a hard time getting proper space on their forehand. So again, everything that's good that can happen to you in tennis happens in front of you the vast majority of the time. So again, from here, guys, we come through, right? Contact is out in front like this. Two different contact heights, but very similar things. At contact, we see these shoulders and chest completely open to the net or facing the net at this point, right? We've also got kind of a shoulder over shoulder position on this low ball here. High ball is a little bit different, where the shoulders are a little bit more straight across at contact, two different types of balls. And then the hips, right? The hips are fully rotated and the belly button is pointed towards the net at contact, also very important. And then we're trying to keep our eye on the ball at contact as well. There's multiple reasons for this. One reason you want your eyes at contact with the ball is because if you're looking at your target before you hit it, and your opponent's smart and your opponent's looking at you, he'll know where you're hitting the shot before you hit it. So I've got a lot of people, sometimes they're guilty of, instead of looking at the ball at contact, even though we can't physically actually see it at contact, they're guilty of looking at the target first, and they actually give away their shot direction. And that's a huge mistake that you don't want to make. So just kind of coming forward from this position, everyone, we'll go here. One thing that Djokovic does really well is he shows his strings to his opponent as he follows through. So he doesn't open the racket face. Of course, we wouldn't want to open it, but you'd be amazed, again, the things that I see coaching and teaching where people do open the strings at contact with the ball. And then another common mistake that I see with rec players as well, or younger junior players, is from contact with the ball here, like this. If I draw this line, and after contact, they're not extending. Look at the extension. Look at how his hand really went through the ball as he goes across. Look at how much that traveled his hand, right? A lot of juniors and rec players make the mistake of hitting the ball and just pulling their hand up right away. They don't extend through it. So they don't get the penetration and they don't get the drive on the shot that they should. And they complain about depth and things like that. Well, it's because you're not extending and driving that hitting hand through the ball. So just remember that here, going through, show the strings to the opponent, right? And then we can wrap and we can finish. And the follow through, right, is a function of what we were trying to do with the shot. Sometimes our follow throughs can be really low. That's okay if we're trying to hit short angles or dipping balls or really, really heavy topspin balls. And sometimes like this on the left, the follow throughs can be really, really high, maybe for driving or we're going for more depth. You know, usually the shorter inside the court I am, if I'm in the service line area or inside the baseline, my follow throughs may tend to be a little bit lower because of how close I am to the net. I don't need quite as much depth if I'm hitting balls like that from further inside the court. Okay. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video on Novak Djokovic's forehand technique. If you found this video helpful or you feel like you learned something today, make sure you smash the like and subscribe button. I'm Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. I'll see you next time.
I learned how to swim in the deep end. Tweaking if you think that we could be friends. Do this with my eyes.